What does Alva Vanderbilt, the Metropolitan Opera, the House of Usher, and textiles have in common? Huh. Would you look at that? The final episode of the Gilded Age. Salutations, everyone. This is D Movie Man, fellow cinephile, popcorn addict, and emerging film critic, coming to you with reliable recaps, reviews, and reactions. And yes, I am here once again with another episode of the Gilded Age, Season 2, Episode 8, our season finale, in terms of winning and losing. This episode is directed by Michael Engler and written by Julian Fellows. And I would like to send a very special shout out to none other than Cotton Candy Jolly Rancher 4075. Yes, you did come along and you asked for an episode where I dressed up in, my own interpretation of period accurate clothing of the Gilded Age, or as close as I could get. But yeah, thank you so much for the request. I just figured, why not? You know what I'm saying? I'm always down. I love to dress up. Although the season is drawing to a close, just having the support and even having subscribers and people checking out these recaps to be interested enough to even ask or suggest that really means a lot. And it just makes me feel like my work as far as this recap series, and just maybe my recap series in general, it really isn't in vain. So once again, thank you so much. Although we technically open up the episode seeing Bertha on the rampage, I'm going to redirect things and start off with Peggy. We see Peggy and her mother arriving at Mrs. Garnett's, where Peggy soon realizes that she has just passed by Mr. Fortune's wife and their child together. Mrs. Garnett then thanks Peggy for her efforts in writing the piece pertaining to the colored schools and the Irish community. Peggy feels that Mrs. Garnett has only herself to thank for her valiant efforts in this matter. However, and unsurprisingly, said efforts nearly come to naught when Mr. Scott learns that the educational board meeting has been moved to today instead of tomorrow at the last minute. Naturally, this is the result of Peggy's latest article. We then see Mr. Scott warning everyone at Mrs. Garnett's home about the Board of Education's duplicity regarding the meeting. They then rush over to the meeting, where, of course, there is no real justification for said meeting being moved, besides, of course, to move forward with the closing of the colored schools without refutation. But, with everyone now present and accounted for, the board has no choice but to consider the evidence that has been presented to them. In the end, 2 of the 3 schools are allowed to remain open, while the third is closed to salvage the Board of Education's wounded pride and general embarrassment. It may not be the outcome they desired, but it is a victory nonetheless. And both Peggy and her mother are very grateful to Mr. Scott for making all of this possible. Best of all, it appears that Peggy's mother and father are finally on the road to reconciliation. The same cannot be said of her working relationship with Mr. Fortune. She meets with him in a park where she informs him that she will be leaving the New York Globe. This, of course, is a shock to Mr. Fortune, as he doesn't understand why she would leave just as she's beginning to make a name for herself, and when she's established a voice that many of their readers want to hear more of. But Peggy also knows that the 2 of them cannot continue on in their present circumstances, lest something even more untoward happen between them. In the meantime, Peggy has a novel that she's been putting off for a while that she can now devote more time to. It's clear that Mr. Fortune will miss her and does wish that things could have been different. But for Peggy, she cannot help the bad timing that has now shaped their lives. And with that, she departs. Now jumping back to the beginning, as I said before, we suddenly see Bertha on the warpath. Why? Because, similar to the end of episode 4 with Mrs. Winterton, Bertha discovers that her Duke has now been stolen away by Mrs. Astor. We then see an event being held by Mr. Gilbert to thank the supporters of the Metropolitan, which naturally includes Bertha, whose contributions to filling the boxes helped make all of this possible. Gladys, who is also there, isn't quite sure what makes her mother's efforts so much more significant than everyone else's. I'd probably say, but I digress. We also see her introducing Aurora to Billy Carlton, who may be a potential suitor for Gladys, despite her suggesting otherwise. Bertha is also quite uneasy when she learns that Mr. Gilbert has purposely leaked the name of the guest of honor, aka the Duke, which is a problem because the likelihood of him not showing up is now very high. Although leaking this news has caused the last few boxes to be snapped up, Bertha knows that if the Duke does not show, she will have a massive omelet on her face. All she can do in the meantime is convince everyone that she'll be the one to deliver. Thankfully, after speaking to Marian, Larry is able to inform his mother about Mr. McAllister and all his double dealing, including the conversation he had with the Duke that won him over to Mrs. Astor's side. Despite Bertha's annoyance, Mr. McAllister makes it clear again that he's on everyone's side, basically, although he is really known for being Mrs. Astor's friend and confidant. What Bertha knows is that the Duke has great estates, fine titles, and so on, but not nearly enough money to keep all of that going. What Mrs. Astor is giving the Duke is New York, and by extension, America. And since Mrs. Astor is in a far better position to give the Duke those things than Bertha is, it looks like in the end, she will be dealt a losing hand. And this is all but confirmed when George informs Bertha that she cannot outbid Mrs. Astor. But, as I have said time and time again, if there's anyone who will always have a card left to play, it is Bertha. And that is evidenced when we see her sauntering down a hallway to meet with the Duke of Buckingham himself. We also see Bertha dismiss Gladys's request to have Billy visit their box at the opening. However, she does take the time to give Mrs. Bruce 2 tickets to the opening, which, given her position, is a shockingly generous gift that Mrs. Bruce is very grateful for. And of course, Borden is only too happy to accompany her. We also see the staff of the Russell household wishing Watson the best as he moves on with his new life. I'm not saying I want something to go wrong because I don't, but it's too soon. So I'm really interested in seeing where that whole situation goes. And I hope this isn't the end of it. We then see the Russells finally making their way over to the Metropolitan for the opening, with Bertha and Gladys dressed to kill. We also see Mrs. Astor, Mr. McAllister, and Carrie making their way to the Academy, where Mrs. Astor is ready to deliver the coup de grace. We also see the Wintertons arriving, and Mrs. Winterton is none too happy upon realizing that she's been tricked when it comes to the matter of her sitting in the central box. You can tell that Mr. Winterton is in no mood for the shenanigans. He's like, look, sit down, chill out, and act like you knew about this the entire time. Now, we already know that Mrs. Winterton is not going to forget this anytime soon. So, yeah. Bertha?
You in danger, girl.
But all Bertha can do now, as her husband puts it, is to go forth and claim her victory now that the central box is once again hers. The full house that greets her upon her entrance makes it all the sweeter, and so does the arrival of Aurora and her husband. And then we see, one of my favorites of course, Mrs. Fish all but confirming the impending loss when she arrives to the Academy and she sees what a poor turnout it is, and she realizes she has made a horrible, horrible mistake. And Mrs. Fish is basically like, look, I appreciate the invitation, I tried to support, but this is a no for me. Okay? It's giving morgue. This isn't giving what it needs to give, and I want to be where the people are. Shout out to The Little Mermaid. So I'm headed over to the Met. Thank you, and good night. And despite Bertha's own anxiety and nervousness, in the end, we see the Duke of Buckingham officially arriving at the Metropolitan Opera, thus securing her position as the potential new leader of New York society. As Mrs. Fish puts it when she arrives, a society that Bertha has now helped reinvent. So when it comes down to it, the Mrs. Astor is finally forced to feel the sting of defeat for the first time. Mr. McAllister then quotes the scripture in Ecclesiastes, "For everything in life, there is a season." And it appears that the Academy season is finally drawing to a close. But let us not forget that no victory comes without a price. As we see Bertha once again dismiss Gladys's request to socialize with Billy at the Met, we also see Gladys being told to show Hector, aka the Duke, her program. He then reiterates the story of Faust, which is also the opera they're watching, which involves a man selling his soul to gain riches on earth, which he soon lives to regret. Mr. McAllister, Mrs. Astor, and Agnes all question what price could possibly be paid to get the Duke to break his oath so easily. George is very curious about this as well, but when he asks, Bertha politely informs him that although he might be the moneymaker in the household, she is the manager. And all other matters, she'll be the one taking care of them. And we soon realize that not unlike her real-life historic counterpart, Alva Vanderbilt and her daughter Consuelo, Bertha has finally made the proper use of her secret weapon. I said, wow. There are things on this show I should not be surprised by. Like, we've seen it kind of building up. Like, we've seen her nudging Gladys towards the Duke. But for it to be such a, like, oh, yeah, like, how can I come out on top in this situation? It just feels a little bit more insidious. And again, this is who Bertha has always been, but you kind of get sucked into what is likable and fun and, you know, just kind of like making their way to the top. You know, someone who is arguably the underdog, you know, like an underdog. Like, there's still a lot of money and wealth and all that, but still, like, when it comes to the society aspect of it, Mrs. Astor, you know, the odds kind of being against her, you start to root for Bertha. But then it's moments like this that I'm reminded that she's not really the heroine. I mean, she's not the heroine of this story. She's really the anti-heroine, and I'm not saying the villain, but the shades of gray as far as villainy, they definitely pop out the same way that it does with George. Like, we've seen that from time to time. So it's just like, But despite what I can say about George, he does not play about Gladys. So when he figures out what's going on, it's not going to be pretty. And if they thought this whole Turner, Mrs. Winterton situation was bad, I am not ready. And lastly, we finally circle back around to Agnes and co., who are still reeling in the wake of Oscar's recent revelation. And really quickly, I'm going to slide in a quick piece about the real life Maud Beaton. And how that aspect of the story is actually based on something that is true to life. So yes, I actually mentioned this at the end of the last recap. Figured I'd trim it down, and now that we're circling back around to this issue and how it's affecting Agnes, the Van Rhijn household, Ada, Marian, yes. So without further ado, the real life Maud Beaton. And what's crazy is that, naturally, this is based on an actual person in history. The woman in question is none other than Cassie Chadwick, which is also the pseudonym used by Canadian con artist Elizabeth Bigley, who went on to defraud several American banks out of millions of dollars during the late 1800s and 1900s by claiming to be an illegitimate daughter and heiress of the Scottish-American industrialist Andrew Carnegie. To this day, there are many historians who consider her to be one of the greatest con artists in American history. While circumstances are less than ideal, Mr. Harcourt, the financial advisor, lets them know that with the sale of this house and sensible investments, there should be enough for them to live on. It won't be luxury, but it won't be poverty either. Oscar is very apologetic, but as I thought, and Agnes also says, who cares? And with all of this chaos going on, Agnes is very certain that Dashiell will likely pull out of the wedding, not wanting to be linked to this doomed House of Usher. Considering that Netflix recently released the Fall of the House of Usher series, I thought this reference was very timely. Sadly, Agnes and Ada must break the news to the household staff that, they can stay until the house is sold, but for all intents and purposes, they're going to have to find and seek out new employment. But there is a bright spot for Jack, who not only has his application approved, but through Marian's intervention is able to speak with Larry about taking things further with his invention. And then, in a rather spectacular turn of events, given all the interest in Jack's invention, we see Larry asking Jack at the end of the episode if he will consider going into business with him.
Money, 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 money! Money! Money, 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 money!
We also discover that through Peggy's intervention, kind-hearted as she is, Agnes does eventually ask Armstrong if she'll be willing to continue in their position at the new home. She also makes it a point to say that it is through Peggy's intervention that this request has come about. I'm not saying Agnes is being petty by bringing that up, but it's not outside the realm of possibility. Although Dashiell is more than willing to pay for the wedding, despite it not being customary, his constant references to his late wife has led Marian to a sudden realization, namely the fact that she cannot marry Dashiell. Saw that coming. This is partly because the two of them want two very different lives, but also because Marian knows that Dashiell is simply settling in the wake of his late wife's passing. In Dashiell's heart, Harriet is still his wife, and it would be very much to his benefit to meet a woman who is more than just a temporary solution and actually shares his dreams and wants to build a real life with him. Marian is not that woman. This is something that was quite unsurprising to Ada, and she is very humbled and grateful to learn that the love that she and Luke, now her late husband, the love that they shared is the example of true, genuine, and earnest love. Frances is also grateful to learn that Marian will still be very much a part of her life, just not as her new stepmother. And as Marian finally breaks the news to Agnes, Agnes makes it clear that not even she expects Marian to simply marry just to please her. But she does warn her that this will be considered her second strike in the social game, and that she must be very mindful of her reputation. And ultimately, she urges Marian to not throw her life away. After being escorted by Larry to the opening, She informs him that she does see the truth in her aunt's words. It's time to take control of her own life. We then see Larry escorting Marian home after another all-night soiree, event, after party. I am telling you, these folks knew how to hang. Even in my younger days, I'm just like, wow. Marian is very unsure of what her next move will be, given the recent financial debacle, but she knows that she loves New York, and no matter what happens, she knows that she and Larry will be friends forever. Well, maybe not that long, as evidenced by the spontaneous kiss he gives her. But that moment is quickly interrupted when Marian learns that Ada must have a very important conversation with herself and Agnes. It pertains to the Reverend/Luke's will, which also contained a letter explaining to Ada what she should do to manage his affairs in the wake of his passing. As it turns out, his father made a fortune in textiles in Boston, but in lieu of his devotion to God, he chose to live without the advantages of money. But he also allowed the company to keep running. But the company has continued to thrive. And guess who has inherited it? Which means that yes, nothing needs to change. For obvious reasons, this is quite the relief to Bannister. Agnes mentions that he can now pass this news along to the staff. But before Bannister leaves, he turns and asks Ada if it is her wish to pass this news along to the staff. I said, that is because, as Ada will now be the one paying their wages, that means that all of their concerns, requests, and queries will now be forwarded to her, not Agnes. And per the recurring theme of this entire season, it seems that in New York, in society, on 61st Street, and especially in the Van Rhijn household, a new era is only just beginning. Oh my. And that closes out episode 8 in terms of winning and losing. And yes, that also closes out our second season. Whew. First of all, went by way too fast. Like 10 episodes? Is that really too much to ask for? I'll let it go. I'll just let it go. And as always, please feel free to leave your thoughts below regarding this recap, this episode, and the season in general. So, once again, this is D, Movie Man, signing off, and I'll see you at the movies.